Okay, when I look at the LOR, what am I looking at is an expert testimony. When I say an expert testimony, it means that someone else is actually want to validate your story for you. At times, many people write the LOR independently, they write the SOP independently, they have the resume independently. To get the best application out is that everything should be interconnected when we look at the documents. So you need to think about when you create a story for yourself, you need to start thinking about, okay, this is what I want to communicate. This is if I get this person to validate what I'm communicating, that sounds like a stronger story. And your resume will support you completely with what else you've done. So it's not restricted only to applicant scores. Even if you have a bad grade or a bad score and you've got backlogs, doesn't matter. You need to put yourself in the best light possible. And that's what the LOR will try to do. Just keep in mind that it's not only about your hard skills, it's also about your achievements, your knowledge and your personality. Personality, your skill set, your soft skills, how your communication skills are. All that needs to come into the LOR. So what are the key aspects of a good LOR? You're going to talk about your aptitudes substantiated through experience through your LOR. You're also going to talk about your personal character and attributes. Your intellectual abilities cannot be saying that, hey, I'm the best. All that stuff is going to come through the LOR. The most important thing is whenever you talk about any of these skill sets, you need to be able to substantiate it with experience, substantiate with the story, substantiate it with something that the professor remembers about you. Bold statements in an LOR is a very shallow LOR. When you make a statement, make sure you have supporting evidential information to support your claim as you go through. Whom to take the LOR from? Generally speaking, many people ask that question very clearly. Hey, I've got 3 different professors. Does the designation of the professor matter? For a master's degree, for a graduate program, you need to take LORs from academics as well as an internship, if you do have an internship or work experience. If you have 5 years of work experience, then you focus more on the work experience LORs, because 5 years ago, what you did has no relevance to what you could be doing going forward. And the professor won't remember you any which way possible. If you have a lot of LORs, then maybe you should take the LOR directly from the principal's HOD, where you can highlight your leadership management. Maybe one LOR is just focus on your extracurricular activities. So those are the things that you really need to take into consideration as you go through it. There's going to be 3 parts. 1 is the introduction, 2 is the body, and 3 is conclusion. Introduction has to state the relationship that you've had with the individual and establish basically what type of relationship. Is it a teacher-student relationship? Is it a project guide? What type of relationship? Is it an employee-employee relationship? Need to define the relationship, need to define the duration of the relationship, need to define what his initial thoughts of you are in that introduction itself, because that sets the whole stage up for what else you're going to be writing in the forthcoming paragraphs. The body is actually a detailed and precise description of your personality, intellectual and technical capabilities. When you're highlighting, you have to substantiate each trait with appropriate example. And that's what I'm trying to stress as much as possible. And also you need to discuss the whole qualification for graduate student. You need to relate it to what it's planning to apply to, which is what you're going to go through. The conclusion is ultimately a one short paragraph that discusses whether he wholeheartedly supports your application, how much value he believes that you will add to the student body once you get into the program of your choice. And at the end, you should always discuss your willingness to answer any question. Important tips when you're doing an LOR. What mailing address to use, as we were talking about. You need to make sure you use the college email address or the work email address as you go through. So make sure it's a professional email address that you're using when you're writing LORs. You also need to make sure that the LOR, the designation is not always necessary. You can definitely write Professor XYZ. Okay, you don't need to use the word lecturer. You don't need to use anything. Because when the first paragraph will actually detail the relationship anyway that I've been teaching him subjects. AdCom decide whether he's a lecturer, assistant professor, professor. Unless he's a true tenured professor, you don't even need to mention it. Universities do not call the recommenders in many cases. Okay, in almost 99% of the cases that we've seen, they don't call the recommender. But in the case that they don't believe your story, they will call the recommender. I've seen that happening with Carnegie Mellon University, where the school actually called the recommender to check and validate the story because they didn't believe it. And the professor did validate it and the student got into the school. Most important thing, the biggest risk that you run when you write your SOP and LOR is you cannot use the same words in your LOR as your SOP. Make sure it sounds different, it reads differently, everything is totally different about the SOP compared to the LOR. So when we work with students on the LOR, from the LOR perspective, if the student has to write it, we help the student draft it by having 3 independent writers actually write LORs separately, so that you have a different style of writing for each LOR that actually creates a lot more credibility in the process. Is it okay you can have 1 or 2 common ideas, but the sentences have to be totally different. Most important is you can't praise yourself in the SOP, but make sure you can do it in the LOR too. When you praise yourself or when you make a superlative statement, you need to be able to substantiate it. When a student writes an LOR, you normally write the naming convention is Neha and you write hyphen and the professor name. Or you normally write LOR and the professor name. Quite honestly, from a professor's perspective, he's never going to write his own name into the LOR. When you write the naming convention, make sure you write the student name ultimately in the convention as opposed to professor write. Always name the convention from this right. He will write the student's name in the file name, not the professor name in the file name. So when you do write if you are writing the LOR, make sure you actually write your name down as opposed to the professor name down, because normally when we write a document, we relate it to the person we are writing it for. You need to make sure that the LORs look different. The reason why they look different, because if they look consistent, same font, same text, same first paragraph, same last paragraphs, they'll know exactly the student has written it and there's no value to the LOR. Even though the professor signed off on it, quite honestly, it's going to sound very repetitive. So make sure you actually let the LORs look different. You're going to have a checkbox when you complete the LOR form is, do you actually waive your right to see the LOR? What does that mean is, have you seen the LOR or have you not seen the LOR? Do you want to see the LOR before it gets submitted or do you not want to see the LOR? When you waive the right, you assume that you've not seen the LOR, which has a lot more credibility than in case you've seen it. So make sure you answer yes to the waiving the right. It means that you've not seen the LOR when it's submitted.